a BTWRLM 174. Fall, spring, summer, summer not, and now August crickets. August crickets. That's our 4 seasons most places. And they're here. And it's a sad day. No August crickets. No pomp and ceremony. It's not a proud thing to be. Really, folks, it's really not a good thing to be. I know you hear me say that every week, and I know maybe some of you doing what you can, but I'm just looking around and we're not quite doing it enough. And we don't have to be all organized up like a big mob, but we certainly need to know we're out there doing it and knowing what part we're doing. It's quite a, the application of what I talk about really has a lot to it that I don't really think about, but that I start, when I visit with people, I find out, we're all doing our part. So we're all individually doing things. If I can, again, these words are used, or I have to use them because that's the way we've been brought up, individual. Anyway, by ourselves, independent. But we all eventually you work with somebody, you work in the same direction. And we pick up our part. We grab our part of the rope. That's the example I used to use a long time ago. We find our place on the rope and we start tugging. We tug on what appears to be the edifices of power, because what we're finding out is they're all false fronts. And you can't not. I hear like people talking about voluntarism, and that people don't understand the dynamic. That's what's being used against you, and this is how they've got it set up. You don't realize that. People will argue with me, but that's okay. When you finally come around to the truth of all this, you'll realize what I've been saying, and at least in part, and you'll realize why I go the way I go, and what we do is what we do. And why, even though it's slow, we still have measures of success beyond all thought of having any success. That you are living in voluntarism. People don't understand that. And what it is you don't understand, and you don't place yourself in a place. This is not your concepts out in the ether doing nothing. These are all in a place. And the place that you're thinking about is controlled. And so your voluntary nature, remember, it's all told it to us. I've talked about this before. Voluntary slavery was not outlawed. Notwithstanding whatever you think about, like even the 13th Amendment, all the 14th, all those things. Legalistically, voluntary slavery was not outlawed. And your voluntary choice, such that it is, to stay where you're at, stay where you is the choice that they say you volunteered. It's really a simple trap that they've sent. And so these utopian or these non-founded concepts are really killing us. They're big traps for us. And understand, I'm not unknowing about what that means, what voluntarism means. I know what it means to us. I know what it means to be volunteering, but that's not how it works in the legalistic world that you are grown into. Like you're in this big test tube, this big experiment all the time. I'm just sitting here pausing and thinking, I'm all so far off of what I was going to start with talking about. It's not even funny. I do this every time, and I still haven't figured out why. But here it is. This is what's coming out. August crickets, folks. This is what we were. This is what we are until we stop being August crickets. Pomp and arrogance and all we think we know and all we think we do or don't do and how that's supposed to respond and how that doesn't or not respond. And the advantage that's taken of you because of all that unknowing perception, or so you think it's knowing perception, not judging anybody here. It's just what we do. It's one of I tell you all the time, it's one of the things I have on my mind is right in the edge is how much of this am I making up and how much of that's going to be what I think is that's not. And you just go a much slower road and you go down the path that you need to go down when you start humble yourself, if I can say it that way. So, this is why I take issue with certain terms, why I usually don't get in conversations, why I won't get in debates. To me, I've had to come through a different route. I've come through an earnest route. It wasn't superfluous. It was in the trenches. That's experience. To me, it was important. It's developed concepts in me, awarenesses in me that I don't see hardly anybody else having, that shows me the things I'm telling you is important. You do not disregard what I'm saying. Until that day in the future, I find some people that have followed their experience and can talk with me directly. I really don't see a whole lot of people I can have a conversation with. The bottom line is, though, everyone's right who says this is nuts. This is insane. And yet, we're in it. And that's what the problem is. We're in it, and someone's imposing that. And that's the requirement right there. However you want to create the analogy for you, the anecdote for you to explain what you're in around you, why it's so nuts, why things don't seem to be what they are, why people are infiltrating in places that before would have been really a societal insult, is the condition that I'm telling you it is. Whether or not you want to go as far as to say you're in a martial law, military occupation, a global prison, whatever you don't want to say, the bottom is I've been asking you. Identify what is going on. That insanity that you are seeing. Identify it for yourself. Identify it. Don't look away. What is that? And then I want to ask, and then I've had you identify for yourself and ask yourself, if I'm in if that world does exist, and I'm not making it up for myself, I've identified that that's what's going on. If that insane world exists, then where do I live? And then your only choice, your voluntary choice is, do you shut up and be a cricket and allow it to continue, or do you deny it? And deny it with all your being, because it's what's under attack. And the cruel joke about bringing life into the world that's a big prison is really a fascinating observation that, those of you that have little ones, you brought them into this thing that was not their choice, they're brought into the same prison. It's a self-perpetuating machine. And the bottom line is we throw it off. That's it. You either throw it off or you succumb to it. And we all succumb to it by different ways when we finally just give up, or decide that there's another way, or just decide that we're going to go ahead and, there's not a bad thing. A lot of times I'm thinking I'd rather be on a boat somewhere, just looking at the sun, looking at me, watching a beach, watch the sands of a beach move down the beach, watch the clouds turn into animal shapes. There's a lot in me that would like to do that and other things, but I don't know. There's something else that's saying this is a bigger matter. We have a lunatic, psychopaths in the world that are thinking they know better for you, what they want for you, and you volunteer to agree when you don't. Say no. Don't consent. When you consent by tacit acceptance, it's over. They say it's over, and here's the point. They have the power of eventually to make that so. And that's the hidden problem. They may not be on you now, but they can come and get you. But some of you, a lot of you already know what the corruption is. So, I've been saying, face it. Go ahead and call it out and get rid of it. Remove it from you right off the bat, like we've done. I've explained to you how you do that on this broadcast without showing you the paperwork, because that becomes a form. I've explained to you how you take this thing down, at least to make the evidence of that what purports to be authority, what we could call authorita, is just nothing but a crime against you and everyone else. And that crime against you and then the additional everyone else brings your stature way up in the face of what you're doing. It's a status that's what you see here. When you hear me talk about extraordinary remedies. Extraordinary remedies are really not remedies that are normally done. You have to have an extraordinary need. Well, when your need is to protect the rest of the people, you now qualify one of the very, very, very important requirements in an extraordinary remedy. And so, as I suggested to you before, what's the problem? You're going to the jailer, to the warden, to the concentrated evil that's controlling you. What kind of answer do you expect? And I said, well, I looked at that problem and said, let's take those people down. Let's take them out, for they have a chance to make a decision. And there's tools to do that, and I've explained a lot of this. So, to me, I just repetition a lot of times. I tell you these notice items, are just to give us a sense of where we are in this world, who are running these decisions, that these things exist, these atrocities that have been imposed on everyone around the world by bullies and brutes, just abject criminals, and then to the higher level, just concentrated evil. Or evil light, as I've told you. It's not the true evil. It's not the real concentrated stuff. In fact, notice there's an awareness that isn't out in the world. I notice a tweet goes by, a pretty nice little Venn diagram, talks about your choices in voting. And they have evil, mostly evil, lots of evil, all wrapped up in round little circles that cover each other, and then you have not choosing that at all. Well, I noticed that the big circle was evil. What wasn't mentioned was the concentrated evil. So there's not even an awareness in society, but there's an evil behind the evil. As I've told you, your police or the military, but that's just the face that you see. That's really the tool of another, the military consequence. And so there's a lot of these dimensions working on, a lot of false fronts. You have to start slowing down a bit and paying attention to before you address it. But your voluntarism is the fact that you continue without any other voice. Even if you act wrong, you're continuing the oppression against you. That's the voluntary life you live. That's voluntarism. And people can deny what they can fight with me over this or not. The reality is you're done fighting, you're done arguing, you're still living in it. And so if I figured out it doesn't matter what my opinion is, it really doesn't matter what my discussion is. Because we're still in it. None of us are away from it. That's one of the problems. And then there's a few that rise to the top that are the controllers of it. They look like they're away from it, but don't let that fool you either. They're all bought. They've all sold their soul, as we've been told. And so I just encourage people I know it's tough. I know people have had a bad rap on getting involved. I know it's a pain. I know it is really a waste of our time at one level, but we're in a prison. You either get your spoon and start digging, literally is what it feels like. Get your spoon and start digging, and you start getting around with others, whether or not you work at the same time. You all bring your spoon to the same hole, start digging. You get working through that wall pretty quick, but you got to start doing it. You got to break out of the prison that they've set for us. They had no right to do that. They had no right to even put the presumption of your voluntary nature on it. In fact, I can show you the laws that says they're not supposed to do that. But see, we're in a crime world. Organized criminals don't care. They just put those things up for our consumption. And yet I've found out those are the neat things because those are in black and white. It's not my opinion when I get there to face that off to somebody. These mirrors of our consequence, global people's consequence against this, the mirrors I show you around the world are there. They're objective. They're not our opinions. They're not theories. They're not hypotheses. They are the reality, and the reality is this prison that they've put us in presumption. That's why one of the first rules in the so-called the just us system, and the system that is just the pressure release control that you think you have a remedy is presumptive. It's adversarial and presumptive. And then the burden's on you. That's almost like 3 strikes, folks. The burden's on you to change it all over against a system that doesn't want you to see it. Why? Because you're living in a prison. And their reasoning is, it's not my reasoning, it's their reasoning. If you're here, then you're subject. Notwithstanding, you look and find the so-called law says otherwise. That you need those applications. Why I keep telling you got to throw those down. Those are the presumptions they exist. And so we kind of fall in and keep going and keep walking with that ring in our nose that I keep telling you. There's a leash on the end of that nose that most people don't see. It's like the Venn diagram showing evil is the worst thing. And I'm telling you there's a concentrated evil that's a bigger circle. It is enveloping this whole earth. And it's fascinating to me to watch, and I'm part of this group. Almost the 7 billion people we're told that are on it can't change that. And don't. It's really kind of I say that I just want to stop talking. We don't and we haven't. And yet we have the power. And I know it's a formalistic way to go about it, but I've suggested how to do that with what I've learned, and that we can do that pretty simply and pretty quickly. You can out the criminals. They're right there. They're everywhere, actually. It's fascinating. And that's not an opinion of mine. That's a fact. I've got a judge. I keep saying this. I don't know if people really appreciate it. I had a friend of mine. He made a comment, and we work pretty closely together on these things. He's known me for quite a long time, and he knows that our case, our default judge, has been there for 3 or so years. And he said he made a comment, and I responded to him in response to what he said and what our lawsuit meant in his case. And then he asked me again, who did you sue? And I told him the political parties. And he looked at me finally, and his eyes opened up, and he says, you have a giant suit. You have a monstrous suit there. The effect of that goes all the way across the country. And I said, you finally understand? Yes. We hit the political parties, the other controllers over our lives. And he finally realized what we had done in 2013 with respect to outing this thing, giving a foundation in law for people that was a question up until then. We've identified your captors. I don't say that all lightly because, man, this is a big burden here. This is what's on us. And the captors were so surprised, I think, and knew because of the dynamic that they couldn't even answer to that. Think about that, how cowardly these people really are. I have a lot of power. I mean, it means nothing. It's just it's a condition, an event that happened. It actually means nothing if we can't bring it into force and effect. But what we established is immense. Immense. Then I just sit behind the woodshed knowing that. And knowing that I watch a powerful tool that anyone can pick up and start using, that if more people picked up would start using, would really be that club that we needed just to deny that who you go to that purports to be a authority is. The same psychopaths that would do what they did to a whole 2 cities and a nation of people, which we run across now, and I'm going to get to it. Here we go. I kind of forget about these things. Not that I was involved with it or nothing to remember, but, these dates come and go. It was yesterday, I believe it was, Hiroshima. 71 years later, Japan wants leaders to visit where the United States psychopaths made an excuse to test a toy that just decimated 2 cities there, Hiroshima being one. Now, I don't get too much into the nostalgic, let's look at the past stuff, but we have to remember, we're finding out now, 71 years later, we're finding out now the crime that was committed in order to test that toy and put the United States into a position of threatening the rest of the world, requiring others to go into defenses to threaten back. Mutual assured destruction should not have been okay with us. But there we are. You see presidents of this same government that created nuclear power for the purposes of destroying other people, by whatever excuse. You see the president it would be a future time to that event. It was a past time for us now. Clinton handing enemies to the purported enemies of this nation the technology to defend against this stuff, so we have mutually assured destruction as a continuing threat. Should not have been okay. That I know the politics behind this little statement that Japan wants the leaders to visit in their celebration of peace. They celebrate this as apparently to try to be an action for the Peace Memorial Park. The picture that I have for the link is a woman that's just sobbing. 71 years later, she's still sobbing over this thing. That this is a political ploy, trying to claim that they want to diminish or stop nuclear weapons, which is an honorable thing to do, but it's in the context of a psychopathy, and there's an agenda underneath that as well. That I wasn't even going to speak too much about it, but here we are, 71 years later. There are people sobbing over lost relatives over the result of United States dropping a new technology and killing off a whole bunch of people on a war that appears to have been fabricated by that very same entity. And so, do your research. I'm just making this observation. It seems clear to me. We can go over and over and over. The bully in the United States of America, it was almost created to be the tool that we were told was the greatest thing going. And the experiment, I think, has been whether the people that make that part and they get rallying up around this psychopathy, whether and how long they could pull that off. And I think that day's coming, so they're going to shift. And I don't know, I kind of made some statements about the shifting over into Israel and the financial structures and these protection, why we're putting so much, the United States bully is putting so much money there, and the re-centralization of the powers of the world into the Israel side. Why it went there, I don't have a clue. But anyway, there it went. I understand there's a religious connotation, but that doesn't answer it too either as much. But so there's a plan that's been written that we are watching unfold. It's that concentrated evil unfolding in the world, utilizing an experiment, and they're getting away with it. That the people are now starting to find out about this. We can look back 71 years now and find out the atrocity that happened, reminded to us in a celebration of a peace park. This peace is war, folks. They've defined that word as peace is war. The Defense Department was a war department. So we are really in an exposure mode here, a disclosure mode, and an action mode, if we will take it on. We are reminded of the psychopathy that's in the world that continues, that affects people now 71 years, longer than I've been alive. Memories that long of people that were affected, and in the most terrible ways. I mean, and it gets worse, I'm sure. There's all kinds of weapons that we use against each other for what is my problem. I've never really, we brought up thinking it was a noble thing to fight for yourself, but now we realize, well, none of the attacking's happening on our land. And then they use that even against. They said, well, we want it. We don't want it on our land. And you go, yeah, okay, that's right. We don't want it on our land. And that made sense. And then in the last 40 years, you watch this expansion of this bully, and you see the plan around it. It's a plan that develops around us, and we sit as crickets to it. And yet, what reflects out, it's like a fractal to me, as we come up with this physics. They want to explain these kinds of things to try and justify their expertness as well. Talk about magi's and magicians. They tell us they are the experts of things, and as we go along, we find out they know nothing. I mean, that's been the big joke behind the Woodshed and other places, I'm sure, that, experts say. In fact, William Roberts and I used to crack up a lot. It wasn't very funny, actually. Experts say. He used to say it all the time on his broadcast. Experts say. So there's hopefully a new day come. I was going to say there's a new day come, but we don't know. The crickets the august crickets. Leading into the fall, folks, remember? The august crickets may make the determination we're not gonna make it a better day. And that's a disappointment to me, even though I'm not going to probably be around to see it. All I can tell you is that what work we do, and the part I put in, and next to someone who else is putting their part in, is slowly making changes and awareness changes in people who are then taking that new awareness and actually the seats of this are infiltrating into the seats of decision again to make the right decision. And I'm asking us to take the part that really bothers us and make that important to us, and take some of our time in our day to go make the wrong that we find, make it right. You don't have to take on the world. Like I said, it was an accident that what I got into was as large as it was. But, things happen. There was probably a good reason why I kind of accidented, and that's in quotes, accidented into the subject matter that I did. But and then it became such a large part of what we see as our foe. The tool. It's just a tool, actually. So let's be careful see, that's why I don't like blaming anyone. There's a big deal going on here. All these people we call them puppets, they're tools. And they're not even the tools, they're a part of another tool. In fact, the World Bank will tell you what they do to destroy your governments is run through toolkits. And there's hundreds of them. And you can find those. I mean, this is not unknown either. I mean, this is the other thing that's astonishing to me. So, Hiroshima, people died on I think it's a lie. My research says all that was a lie. It was set up as a lie. It was set up to create another dynamic in the world that creates the ability for them to go on and make war. And then you see after that they try to figure out how they figured they couldn't make war all the time, so let's figure out how we're going to make economy and peace. That was a tougher deal. And really it's not. If you take the psychopaths out, the need for them to kill people, and you just put people who just want to get along and produce in their lives, the creative part, there's none of this that's needed. And I don't want to, and it's not called capitalism. I think everyone's got that mistake as well, but and what capital is, there's a whole study on that anyway. But bottom line is you should have a capital in yourself and not as a head tax or a head to be taxed. See how they do all this? They take all these words and they make it what they need, and it has the same sound. Like I've told you, civil rights. You think it's something good, and all it is it's the government's notice to you that you become subject to that jurisdiction, and you are going to enjoy the exactions of every kind, the wrongful extortions of every kind. And then they give you the list. And no other. So they use these words, like I said, peace is war. Defense Department became the War Department, was the War Department before. They keep us off balance, and we continue to be quiet against it. So there's the anniversary of the psychopathy of the future, which we're living in right now, is a war of the world, war on the world, now under the name of the war of terror. They call it the war on terror, but it's the war of terror in about everywhere. So you can understand why we're terrorized at every point. I don't mean that you are terrorized. I'm just saying that that's their plan, is to try and terrorize somebody. Terrorize something's threatened in you. And then if they did it real good, they pointed to someone else that was doing it except for them, and you focused on that. Now they've won. That's why I say there's a proper action you have to take, and there's someone proper against whom you're going to take it. So they create all these terrors, and they create these things. This brings us up to, and I was going to just bring this up really more for a notice to y'all in Florida, beyond the obvious, just the direct danger to us all. I've kind of fallen away from doing the health stuff and that kind of thing, but here's a little bit of I used to do the product recall things, and I just stopped doing that. There was just so many that were coming, and then it's gotten so much worse. Like, what the heck happened to life that everything we do has got some threat, some biological threat to us? It is really another fascination. But Zika and just folks down in Florida. I think you're in real trouble here if you're in those areas that they've declared, the Florida health officials have confirmed that of local Zika transmission. I guess they're talking, this is a new car, the Zika. It's a Zika coupe. It must be a sports car too, because it goes pretty quick. The Zika transmission, they're having some trouble with it. Maybe this is another recall. 4 individuals in Miami-Dade and Broward counties have been infected with the Zika virus by local mosquitoes, Florida health officials said. This is the news that came out. But what was tied to this was something new, more along the martial law provisions, that they were also saying that they were going to be going essentially door to door to take blood and urine samples. Now, what's interesting, if I understand this correctly, and I haven't studied this too deeply, all the one that they can test for is actually through a blood sample, so the urine sample was something else. And they were going to use the cops to do that. If you don't think we're right on the edge of them using a legitimate police power excuse to infiltrate your peace and safety and security and privacy. But the main important problem for me was that listen, folks, they're going to say this Zika is important and to watch out for the pregnant women. Remember, let's look at the truth of this now. Just look at more of what they were saying down in Brazil, and in Argentina scientists brought it up, because I want the women that are down there, and pregnant women, to understand a little bit different. You need to stay out of the way of whatever they're doing. You need to keep your door shut, and this is not a fear-mongering for what they're doing with Zika. It's how to start to protect yourself against the excuse, these things as an excuse for the government to infiltrate and actually hurt you where you didn't understand you could be hurt. And like I've said, I'd rather be protected by even something I can't prove, but it looks plausible, than to disregard it and find out that was that threat was the truth. That down in Brazilistan, in Argentina, scientists were saying it was not Zika. In fact, I did the broadcast and showed you that the incidence of Zika had nothing to do with the Zika virus. It had nothing to do with the mosquitoes either. So we're going to get to maybe what that is. Remember, the mosquitoes were the male ones, and there was some discussion maybe on their future generations. But actually, the male doesn't bite people, so this is going to be a different type of transmission vector that they're not talking about here. But this brings on their police powers, which is health. They can do just about anything if they can state a police power. I told you a long time ago, I said, I don't know if the people are going to learn how to run to that as a defense or the government is, and who wins that foot race is going to be really in the position of advantage, and the government figured it out. The people are still clueless. And yet, that said, in certain areas, subject matter areas, not this one, we've been using the government's police powers in order to reinvigorate production. And so there's a way to use the weapon, the tool, the two-sided sword. Which way is it going to cut? Are you on the handle or is someone else on the handle? Well, right now for this, the government's getting on the handle. They're testing us out. They're going to be doing their door-to-door testing for something that hasn't been shown to do anything, but has some interesting problems around it. And remember, we were talking about the fact that the scientists and the medical people down in Brazilistan and Argentina were saying it wasn't Zika, it wasn't the mosquito, and it wasn't some other things. It was the larvicide they were using. And so here's the story, interesting problem. And then you notice, you saw the pictures, they started spraying right away. They didn't tell people, you better not breathe this stuff in. They just said that you're not going to be at risk, as much of a risk. Stay indoors a little bit. They didn't really give a big outcry, when in fact, the material that they're using may very well be the problem. And so, moving on to aerial organophosphate spraying in Miami was a little story I got out of Cryptagon.com, and he says, run. And then he brings up this condition, this product that they're spraying is called NALED, N-A-L-E-D. N-A-L-E-D. And so let me just read a quick little thing here. And I have a link for the the broadcaster page that'll break down what this thing does and is. And just in summary, inert ingredients is also a part of this product, are in most pesticide applications, and NALED is no exception. So no different than Monsanto's Roundup, they had inert ingredients, which we find out are not, and are thousands of times more toxic. This NALED also has the same problem with so-called inert ingredients. Carol Cox from the Northwest Coalition of Alternatives to Pesticides lists solvents and dibrome that are listed as inert ingredients. Naphthalene, which has been classified by the EPA as a possible human carcinogen because it has caused lung tumors in mice. It has also caused headaches, restlessness, lethargy, nausea, diarrhea, and anemia, where, they're going to get you some pharmaceuticals there. You're going to go to the hospital and get your bills all having to be paid in order to cover all this that you think is coming just from your ill health, and it's actually imposed upon you by what they spray. You see, they don't tell you what it's going to do. They just say it's going to be stopping Zika. They don't tell you it's going to have another effect on you. The after effects of all this. 1,2,4-trimethylbenzene. It's an eye and skin irritant and a nervous system depressant that causes headaches, fatigues is what they have here. Don't know if that's a typo. Fatigue, nausea, and anxiety, as well as asthmatic bronchitis. Now, nervous system depressant. Doesn't that sound a bit like what they say Zika was doing for these babies down in Brazil? In fact, when you read a little bit more, it's a big toxic inhibitor for development of your nervous system and your brain stem and all that stuff. And so this is not even nailed. They're going to nail you with this. The inert ingredients are worse and have effects. As well as the NALED here. I haven't got to the NALED yet, but it does the same thing. It has effects on your nervous system and your spinal cord system. So, what they're not telling you is they're using Zika as an excuse to do what the doctors in Brazilistan and Argentina told us was the larval side, is the spray that they're putting out there in this place in Florida. So all you folks, you should maybe you should make a mask at this point. I'm going to be very interested to see how many cases of this Zika where babies are growing with 33% smaller heads develop now that they blame on a mosquito. They get us going in the wrong direction, And we don't know who and how to stop them because we don't know what's after us. Now, remember, these sprays are being done, but under Title 50, and they have to give you notice, and then you should be able to have an argument in a public comment if you quickly get in and send your notice. And so when they gave you the notice they were going to spray all y'all down, and anywhere but down in Florida, you had the right to respond and say, hey, wait a minute, we have some problems here. And you really have to keep really formalized about that, and you really have to be on point, not of your opinion, but you have to have some facts. So I keep telling you, look in the news for your evidence. You can have all this stuff ready to go, where these other doctors are saying it's the spray itself that you're using to remedy it's the mosquito that's actually causing this. And you can cause a problem for them to just implement it without a say. If you're a cricket, then you get sprayed. You're going to get sprayed with this like like they're going to spray for the mosquito, only it's going to affect your little ones. It's going to affect your asthma condition. It's going to affect your nervous system. It's going to make you feel sick. They don't care. So I've got a blogcast. You can look at what NAILED is, N-A-L-E-D, NAILED. They've got a spec sheet on it. You can read all about what they're doing and what they're spraying on you. Crickets. Florida to spray residents like bugs over Zika with a chemical that ironically reduces fetal brain size in studies. This is speaking right to what the people, the doctors, or the scientists and doctors, actually, both of them, in Brazilian and in Argentina told us, which I reported here behind the woodshed. So they're bringing in an excuse like they haven't been able to bring Ebola in, now they're going to bring this in. And now they're breaking down your civil rights, and they're actually doing it the right way for an occupier that's constrained to public policies of large threat. The police, so-called police powers. Remember, police is military, and that's their license to come in and destroy just about everybody. That's what they're using in this community care. That's what they're using in the necessities. That's what they're using when they went extrajudicial. They're telling us exactly what they're doing. Only here they're going to spray you just like this article says, like a bug. And it's not very cool, and they don't care. They'll tell you that it's okay, and they tell you it's not care, and so all the crickets will get sprayed. And then as we find out, and I haven't had a chance to read this, it came pretty quick this morning for me, with everything I'm doing to set up in the broadcast, was I think Gary L. put this in and shows. I got another Blogcaster link that he put into the RLM chat. Zika virus. ATCC VR84 trademarked. ATCC registered. It's a product. The Zika virus is a product. Now, he also mentioned, if I remember right, and again, I wish I had more time to really track this down, mentioned that this is the Zika, and I told you this a long time ago. When you hear the word novel, like the pig's fly flu, novel means it's patented, it's a product. Well, here it is, and I think Gary L. was saying that he had heard that, or read that he had heard that this Zika was tied to the term novel, and sure enough, it's a product. And so we have another evidence that it's not only, and we're also understanding these products are usually used for weaponry of some nature. And so not only are they using, this is an excuse, they have control over this virus as a product. Now I refer you back to Title 50. You live in a military consequence, and the military occupier has license to test on you. And I will go back to this reference to Clint Richardson in Lethal Injection, where he reads from you those sections of Title 50, about 20 minutes in, if I remember that right. This is, you're watching the occupation of your life, a military occupation of your life, play out right in your eyes. And so we see Zika virus as a product. What was it doing down in Brazilian? And so what technologies are they actually using that they claim to us they are not doing, that they're working hard to get done? If they'll lie to us about a mosquito, they're going to lie to us about a whole lot of other things, and they've got an agenda they're running, and they just got to wait until everybody is pacified enough to bring it in. Again, the occupier, can't really piss off the natives. That's the number one rule. Because they found out historically, and this might maybe is being augmented a bit so that it isn't even a reality no more. People are so beat down, they won't respond. So this rule may actually be changing. When you piss off the natives, they rise up and they throw you out. It's not good for an occupier. Number one rule, don't piss off the natives. And so this is another call to the crickets, isn't it? Zika virus has a product to be sold. What? The insecticides are a product to be sold that have byproducts themselves, but I mean they have consequences that are outside their use. That is apparently okay. It's okay that you suffer these nervous system disorders. It's okay that you have nausea, that you have asthma. It's all okay. And then we find Zika as a product? Well, wait a minute. That sounds like what we've been talking about. Monsanto makes a Roundup, and then they go and do the biotechnology to make a plant so they use more chemicals. This is war of terror against you. It's about the bottom line. And so we hear these ideas, and you got these mosquitoes that are made through biotechnology to carry this virus. It's a product, and boy, I just wonder, being a fly on the wall where all these contracts are written up to do this. Who are these people? Even think to do this stuff. And the government agencies that promote it, because the bottom line is the bottom line. How do I know that, folks? How I told you. Maybe do a quick little test here. Those of you that have been listening to me, where in Title 50 do you look to see this is a financial consequence the military of the world is, the military industrial complex is protecting? Where do you see that in Title 50? All right, enough time. You should answer quickly. It's in the appendix, and it directs you to Title 12, Section 95A. They see the source for that law is Trading with the Enemy Act in 1917. Now, we've been through this. I can repeat this over and over. It's the same train. It doesn't change. We're going to the same destination. We start from the same terminal. We terminate at the same place. Trading with the Enemy Act had a provision for savings clause for citizens of the United States, whatever those were. Those were actually the corporations at that time, U.S. citizens, if you will. And they removed in 1933 the exception to the prosecution for those citizens. That was you, because then they presumed you to be one of those entities. And so you are just part of a big corporate structure that the bottom line is the bottom line. And Zika is a product. You go research this better. I wish I had more time to really look that down. I didn't have it, but it's a freeze-dried product. If it's a product, folks, how did it occur naturally? And who are the psychopaths that take something that happens naturally and make it a product? For what purpose, I guess, even if you were going to make a product? It can't be good. But so this is the problem. You get the monkey mind trying to make monkey critters. And so it was covered over Freaker's Ball Friday. They covered this little story quickly. Part human, part animal embryos. The government is now going to allow part human, part animal, genetic modified engineering. This was like writing on the wall, we know, but here it's now on the table already. It's like not even an ethical consideration. The federal government announced plans Thursday to lift a moratorium on funding of controversial experiments that use human stem cells to create animal embryos that are partly human. So here we see the key. It's in the funding. Moratorium on funding. Now, while they're going to remove the moratorium on funding this kind of science, they're destroying the mining producer by removing the funding for an agency to receive the application for us to get our patents, which is really a fiduciary breach, crime. We only have so many people to fight this battle, but that's one of the things. They'll fund this, but they won't fund our production. Think about that as well. When this is a financial war, they don't want you to have the wealth. They want their system to have the wealth and the technology. And they're going to be combining human stem cells with animals because they're going to claim all kinds of neat things they get to do. But one of the issues is that scientists might inadvertently create animals that, remember folks, you're a human. You're already an animal. So they're not really doing, in their psychopathy, they're not doing anything but mixing animal genes here. But they have a problem because they don't want to have a smart animal or one that all of y'all feels has a conscience. Because that becomes apparently an ethical problem. One issue is that scientists might inadvertently create animals that have partly human brains, endowing them with some semblance of human consciousness or human thinking ability. Another is that they could develop into animals with human sperm and eggs and breed, producing human embryos and fetuses inside animals or hybrid creatures, what we call the chimera. Chimera, whatever you want to, whichever flavor you want to go. Well, let's get back to that human brain thing. How will they know, folks? And let's think about how ethical this actually is. Even if you have an inkling that, maybe there's something cool about doing that. Who are they to decide the consciousness of a creature that they are creating? Who are they? Are they now taking the hand? They're now the hand of God. Where is the line that says if the animal could have consciousness, that you had the right to kill it? Not the creature, because you're going to use that as a tool, as some kind of a product. I'm talking about killing the consciousness to make it so it doesn't work if it's capable. And how do we know, like people that are in comas, that they're still there but can't respond? How do we know there's not a human in there that can't respond? To me, this is pretty terrorizing. Notwithstanding the science fiction ideas you can get, with all these creatures running around, and the allusions to Atlantis and all this other stuff, and the mosquito weapon they made, supposedly, and Mu. Boy, we're right on track to do this one again, aren't we? When did the crickets get manipulated like that? We have some cricket hybrids coming. Maybe the crickets have a human consciousness that has to be killed, folks. Maybe your silence is going to be adjusted by this in the future. Your cricketness, your cricketdom is going to be invaded and it's going to be changed. They're going to deem you to be this chimera, this human thing that they've made and invented. We heard about the ant colony, real-time epigenetic destruction and changing going on in ants? It was talking about you, folks. Could have said crickets, but see, they don't have a colony that way. So they have to put something you can see. I'm telling you, that is on you. They're telling you that they can change you in real time, and when you become one of these creatures, and they figure out that you have a consciousness, who are they to kill it or disregard it? How do they know when this is coming out? You see, all the experts say, we talk about this all the time, oh, we didn't know about that. What if they make one of those creators that could have a consciousness? What have they done? These are much more serious type of evils in my mind that we're toying with, that you're now finding they're making excuses to continue. And when you get to this point, doesn't someone who has consciousness, don't they have the right? We were talking about letting monkeys have personhood. What if it's like Planet of the Apes and finally one of those critters says, "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape human." Scientist. What if one day they say that? Now we have to give them a vote, don't we? It's fascinating. I mean, at some point, it's fascinating to think about. It's terrifying to think about when I consider the ramifications of what this reflexive condition happens and how it's going to change our societies. Oh, we're going to be dumbed down enough to say, well, they don't have a conscience, and we're going to work them, and so they're little workers without a conscience. They're little robots without a conscience, but they take human form. They make the robot look like human, and then they make a human work like a robot. You won't know the difference. But as soon as they have a capacity, they're going to get a vote. And I think we're seeing this in the anticipation, notwithstanding the problems that we see with voting now. We see the big joke that it is, if you ever thought it was anything. I've told you, it's a business commercial franchise on the commons, first of all. And then the voter has no choice. It's the elector that has the choice. So these so-called superdelegates, yeah, that's not you. But they're seeing that the captives are getting a lot restless. So DHS is to run elections once voting classified as a critical infrastructure. Not only are they going to make these humanoids, humanishes, they're going to now control those people, what those things are going to vote on in the future. Now, how they're going to vote. They're going to control your vote. The thing is that what's stupid about this whole thing is why it's irrelevant anyway, but it's important. It's important enough to bring it into secrecy by covering it under national security. And this is the excuse. This is the police, the military power excuse. DHS is to run the elections, wants voting classified as a critical infrastructure. Not only is your vote secret, but now the whole process is secret. Now, I mean, we can go on and on. I would have over time about the nonsense about all this voting and the machines and Diebold and, yeah, you're going to die bold, all right. No, I'm not going to go through all that. Just listen to what they're telling us is coming. Why I keep suggesting you better understand that authority, that jurisdiction. Don't deny it. It's got a lot of power. It'll kill you. You gotta, it's like electricity. You disrespect it, it'll kill you. You don't stand on the third rail, it'll kill you. So you gotta understand this is a power that's in the world that's very real. Now you're gonna have to start making action contrary to its imposition and its envelopment of everyone's life. You can see the dynamic. They're going to call the elections a critical infrastructure. You see this is set up in the code beforehand that I was telling you about years ago they were doing. They keep adjusting and keep adjusting and keep adjusting, and we're crickets to all this action. And then they bring in this idea that they're going to somehow, the experts who are completely wrong most all the time, scientists finding out, it's science pocus, I keep telling you, they keep finding out how much they don't know about reality. All the time saying that they have all the experience to put on you things like a carbon tax or like climate change, and oh, it's your fault. So they make these creatures that have just enough consciousness after time, and they're going to have a vote. No, look what they're doing. You talk about an alien invasion. And all this is now put under critical infrastructure secrets? What's the point then, I guess, is the question I start to have. And that's the point. Why are we tolerating it now? Look how ridiculous it's going to go, and people are actually sitting back watching that and thinking that it's a continuing, ongoing, cool thing to do. And the psychopaths reign. And it's going to come through the tool. I think Patrick Wood says it's the end-all be-all. I say it's a tool. Technocracy is a tool. They're going to bring it through what they told us all a long time ago, good living through chemistry or something. Most people of my age, they were all saying, oh, Greg, give me more dope. And I looked at all those people doing the dope and said, well, what are you doing? I mean, what's your life? I mean, you sit there and do the dope and you start looking like a dope. That was my experience. I didn't see any benefit of it, actually. Now, I understand that it's like alcohol in a way, or it's like some other thing you can do. I guess it's like anything you can do. For myself, I never got into that. And now we come to now and we see past the denial of the government that this stuff does any good. It's actually can be used as a medicine like anything I would understand as an herb. And yet you see the system setting up the mindset to control the masses, to deny themselves something that would actually hurt the very system that's hurting them. And why there's so much protection on the government side against your acting in it. Because it takes away the bottom line, another portion of the bottom line. Again, every time they legalize something, It's to the bottom line. That means they're going to take from somebody something. The voting is so bad, they're going to try and make it a critical infrastructure to secretize that. Who you're voting for and who they want is these psychopaths that are going to keep the agenda on. And out pops, and I'm not sure what the psyop's going on here, but we'll just use it for information. Who you all are going to be voting on, those that do vote. And think about that. Those that don't vote, you see, you're presumed in the system and going to be affected by it and are disenfranchised by it. And their answer is, well, you have the right to register. And that's not an answer. And so when you start wrapping your head around this dynamic, you're going to start to understand a lot more on how to better approach this problem. It's actually helped me move into the decisions I've been making to see how you address taking them down. They do have a limit. It is in the law. So what you're going to come is the day that you are standing there, maybe the only guy or woman standing there with the evidence that what you're looking at is a system of organized criminal syndicates. And what was funny, the FBI just arrested 46 people or something in what they called in New York a crime family. I didn't hear anybody from the government arrested. And I have a court case that shows that they're all committing treason. Not my opinion. They agreed. They tacitly responded. They tacitly didn't answer. And in law, it says that they agree. I don't know what else more to say, folks. And yet I didn't see the FBI arrest anybody in the organized crime family called government, despite the evidence. And so we have more. Those of you thinking about Hillary Clinton, and those of you that, rah, Trump, not into that. I'm not talking this way. I'm saying there's more evidence to prove what we've been saying is the way to look through the nonsense, to call these psychopaths out, that it is being stated. And I have a little letter here to read, bottom line, just a little paragraph to kind of show you the development of this. The WikiLeaks, Hillary supplied cash, weapons, and tanks to Al-Qaeda, Al-CIA, to kill Gaddafi and ship weapons of terror, for terror. And this is, I know, old news. Maybe some of you don't want to hear about it, but again, it's evidence. You may not think it's important. These are the people some people are going to vote for. These are the psychopaths that have driven us into the decisions that would bomb people 71 years ago and not have a second thought about vaporizing the population. Despite all the denials, despite all the other things, there's a letter. It was supposed to be confidential. And then it was unclassified. Just a paragraph here, folks, and I'll move on. And I'd like to get in. Again, I'm talking to the choir at some level. I'm talking to things we can't really do more about. But there is a sentiment in the world that will choose psychopaths over someone else's better interest. How they got over on that on us, I don't know. They didn't get over on me. They didn't get over on most of my listeners, I'm sure. But that's beyond knowing that and not acting. It's like spread the word here. We have evidence. As an extremely sensitive source added, this is part of the letter. It was unclassified, a 2-pager, I think it is. An extremely sensitive source added that the rebels are receiving direct assistance and training from a small number of Egyptian special forces units, while French and British special operations troops are working out of bases in Egypt along the Libyan border. These troops are overseeing the transfer of weapons and supplies to the rebels. This is a letter from an aide in Clinton to Clinton, Hillary Clinton. This is notice that she knew. This is the arrogance of a psychopath. This is just this one phrase. I don't want to go through all of it. It's just on and on. This is the type of people that are in the world, that are in the seats of decision, that are making the decisions, and they're on your back. That they're also, rolls downhill to you while you stand in the stinking abyss because you don't want to crawl out. That's not my rule, folks. I'm not judging you. We're all at different levels in this stinking abyss. You're either crawling out or you're not, or you're out on top and you're doing battle at the edge. I'd like to think I'm doing battle at the edge. These people, no, they're lying to you all. My listeners know that, but we got to move beyond. Okay, I know that. We got to move into how do we influence the people to understand truly this is what's really going on with these people. By saying this about Hillary, I'm not underwriting Trump or anybody else. They're all no good. I gotta listen again. I've got a judgment that says anybody in the major political parties, Democrat or Republican, is a felon. They're committing treason. There's nothing here I'm talking to support anybody. They all need to be arrested. I'm trying to point out there's evidence for us to start showing who these people are, and be the voice of that presentation. And I don't, again, I've told you got to do it in diplomatic ways. More like a question. Did you know this? Here's an classified letter. It says this. You understand the scope of this, folks. When you look at Syria and you look at Iraq, this is the French and the British and the Americans working with Egypt here. It's like they were working with Jordan. We talked about all this. This is now proof. If it was ever thought that what I said was just conjecture through the news, that I tell you is notice, this is confirmation that I'm not, I'm just not talking. Not that it puts anything on me. I don't take anything for that. I'm not into any of this, actually. But it's evidence of a wrong against us that we're silent to, that trickles down, a trickle-down effect, a trickle-down economy. It's trickle-down fraud. There is no economy. The only economy is how they can get the people to work for so little. That's the economy. They're saying, how can we get this to work more efficiently to make more profit for us? What can we take from them that they'll allow us to take? I don't know what this WikiLeaks thing is. I don't know if it's another type of psyop. I don't know if they're testing us and desensitizing people to the fact of the crime to get these people into office, to continue that condition so nobody just says anything. But here it is, folks. A document. Again, everything's on evidence in a court of law is paper. You can disregard it, or you can find this is part of the problem in your life you see affecting you or those around you that you want to change. To me, a lot of this is not news, it's notice. It's notice or evidence. With notice, I have an opportunity to respond. With evidence, I have an opportunity to respond with the proof. And I'm trying to reduce this down to real simple stuff, really. It's not that hard, actually. Yes, they keep telling us, they keep selling it, and I have to admit it is kind of difficult, but I found it that it's really not difficult when someone's in trespassing on a wrong you're trying to stop. You'll speak up, that it's hard to speak in front of people. Well, yeah, that tends to be something that we tend not to like to do that, but when there's people coming and they say the wrong thing against something I've been studying, and they're trying to convince some other people that they're right and they're actually wrong, well, I don't have much trouble at all speaking up. In fact, it's maybe a problem for a lot of people. I make a lot of quick enemies out of people that say they know something and they don't. And I only say I do when I have this proof. I'm only saying that I do because I have the proof that they're wrong. And yet they're coming to sell their goods. I certainly don't have a problem speaking in front of people. All of a sudden I find out I don't have a problem speaking in front of people to out that. So I think this is a myth about us not wanting to speak in front of people or go to the government and speak to people that are inside that truly do not know. They really do not know. What they know or they're told. They're told by these bar members. Again, another party to our suit that admitted they commit felonies and treason. This is the government that we sit up around that starts a system that's going to does vacuuming up everything as critical infrastructure that you need to know better, even if you thought that it was good. They're taking it away from you. To the funny farm. And so we get to that. Finally, and this guy really, to me, this guy's a sleaze bag. He's works for the Department of State Department, and he's this press secretary types. I don't even know who they are. I just kind of play off who they are. They're just slimier than heck. But we finally get a truth. And we get a truth that apparently right at the end, he's about ready to not do this anymore. He's going to move on. They'll put someone else in. And maybe he's about run to the end of his sanity, ability to keep sane in this insane lie that they produce every time. 7-second video. The United States Department of State bursts out laughing Think about this, folks. These are this maniacal. Again, it doesn't matter where they are. If they're in government, they're a psychopath in waiting, or an aiding and abettor, or whatever. These people know, and they're nuts, and they talk to you in your face about what they're doing, and they know they're lying. But anyway, he bursts out laughing at the idea that they communicate for, quote, transparency and democracy. Top 10 rogue state U.S. crimes prove our tragedy comedy will continue until public demand arrests. There we are, what I've been saying. The people have to stand up and demand for arrests. What we're actually demanding, and we're getting the soft shoe stall, and so that's going to take us more. But this is what we're demanding. We're demanding arrests. You've heard me say that. This is not something I'm saying now because I've read it. We've been demanding now the arrests. We found that they're felons, and it's the arrest is a little bit different. The arrest, just like a bank robber that runs away, it takes a little bit more to cause the arrest. Now they just swat you and beat you down, but we don't have that power as the people anymore. We should have never lost it. But this is what they're asking. Transparency and democracy is a joke to these people. And let me play you it's a 27 seconds. Let me see if I think last week it went well on the video, so let me try it again. You can hear it for yourself. He's never believed this at all. And he's talking to a bunch of interns that come in as well. So listen close for 27 seconds. Here we go.
Welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Sorry,
I thought it was
an
exercise. An exercise in spin and obfuscation.
All right. Can you tell us my last briefing? Welcome to.
So there's his last briefing. He spills the beans. There's people in government don't care about you. They think this transparency and democracy is a joke. They know the truth. The transparency is that what they say tries to get you to look through them so you don't see the crime that they're committing. This should not be okay with us. I don't know what really more to say. I start thinking about what am I saying. I've said this over and over. There's more evidence. More evidence, folks. I mean, what are we doing? We're in a court of law all the time. Why are we not stepping forward? These people have no regard for what we consider, in the better side, democracy, and the so-called transparency that we think is being able to see everything that they do. And it has nothing to do with that, and this guy just proves it. He knows. Can you imagine the meetings they have as they're preparing to come out and talk to these people day in, these media types day in and day out? The tongue-in-cheek statements they make, we all see it, and we stay silent to it. Here's the evidence of the truth. They know it. He knows it. This guy might be losing it. That's why he's being moved out. He might be actually going insane here. If you see the video, you kind of see a little bit of he's kind of lost it a little bit here. It just pops out. He couldn't hold it no more, right at the end. And these people are psychopaths, and they don't care about you. They don't care that they're lying to you. They don't care that has ramifications whatsoever. They're going to do what they have planned to do, whatever that plan is, and that plan may include nuking a whole group of people, a whole city of people, twice. Let's bring it up to comment today. How about droning you? These are the people that laugh that are deciding how to drone people, kill them, extrajudicial. And in the news, on time, newly released U.S. drone policy explains how targets can be chosen. And so this is a broadcaster post you'll get, a link, says it's from CNN. The Obama administration has released a previously secret 18-page policy guidance document that lays out how potential drone targets may be chosen and approved and the president's role in the decision-making process, which you'll find, just to paraphrase this whole thing, and they use the shall be discussion like shall be discriminating and precise as reasonably possible, and says direct actions against high-value targets will be taken only where there is near certainty that the individual being targeted is, in fact, the lawful target and located at the place where the action will occur was one of the guidances. Reasonably possible, folks. Near certainty. Lawful targets on an extrajudicial decision made by bureaucrats that the president, whoever the president is, not even just Obama, doesn't even have to actually be involved in the decision. But if a majority of those bureaucrats decide so, he just has to be noticed. They are reasonable, possibly, near certain that they are lawfully targeting you, is the standard they're using, and that standard is extrajudicial. There is no law and justice and due process. The entire report is a crime. It's evidence of a crime. The measure of which is as reasonably possible, with near certainty, over a lawful target in a system that's not lawful. It's legal, but not lawful. It's extrajudicial. There is no law. It is astonishing that they came out. You get to see it now. These are the psychopaths that make these decisions, that don't care about you, that are going to be it's all a bureaucracy. Your government is already a bureaucracy. This is beyond administrative now, for those of you that think that this is all we're dealing with. That are making decisions regarding these military weapons, and they say this is just on how they kill you with a drone. It doesn't mean that this is only limited. Remember, you live in a martial law. You're living under a military consequence. They can decide to kill you with Zika if they wanted. Who defines reasonable? When you're dealing with a psychopath, it's the psychopath. If you're dealing in a cabal of psychopaths, it's the cabal of psychopaths. That you do not have a say here is really an astonishing point that I don't hear more people discussing more and taking more action to call it out, to stop it. What do? Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm really focused all on this tight, but there's at least records you can start making. There's challenges you can start making. I've told you, challenging the war of terror for being really an excuse to cover the war on terror being a cover for the war of terror. It might be a good place to start. But these people laugh at transparency and democracy, which to me it's laughable anyway, but they laugh for a different reason. And then they hand you their droning policy. It's a policy, it's not law. It's a policy, it's not law. It's policing, it's not law. No due process, where they feel it's reasonable. How many times have I told you and read notices from the news that showed you that these people in government will take a bunch of facts, put them together, and based on their prejudice make an outcome for you that you're doing that's not so? And how certain are they of that? Always, folks. That's just should terrify you. They're always certain of that. I feared for my life is a death warrant for anybody that's feared them. Should terrify you. And I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping it terrifies you not into deer in the headlights, but into action. Fight or flight, folks. There's nowhere to run. Now you better turn around. Now you better fight them. And I'm saying be careful on the fight. There's a strategy and tactics for all of that right now. We're infiltrated and surrounded. It's over as far as that goes. We're outmanned, outgunned, outmined, outlogicked, out strategies, out everything except for our awareness and our intelligence to come back intelligently to change it. And if you don't think they see you coming, you don't think you're part of these policies, I want to remind you, again, older documents, read them, identified them, kind of laughed at them. We even, put our fist against them against the ego. I'm one of these, so, screw you, government. You're not going to get that chance if this drone policy keeps going with these reasonable possibilities of near certainty. Got a Blogcaster link I'll have available to you later when I post it. 72 types of Americans that are considered potential terrorists are in the official government documents, which I'm sure is attached to this droning possibility reasonable possibility that you're of near certainty to be a lawful target for these people. Yes, we're not hearing anybody droned yet. I say yet, emphasis. This is not the only thing to be focused on either, but this is one of the things that we can see. We talked about all of this in the Patriot Act and what they took away from you when they did that in different areas. Now they called you names. They say you're a potential terrorist. What was it? What's the difference between that and reasonably possible? Pretty simple how they've taken you, put you right in that list. So I'm not going to go through the list of 72. That was just one thing. The list is probably more. Anybody they don't like. They just how about if they just said anybody that thinks and breathes is not us? Would have been a better definition for who a potential terrorist with respect to, if there's any respect to be given to these psychopaths in government. A thinking, feeling, conscious man or woman is a threat to us. Would eventually also apply to the chimera, however your flavor of discussion of enunciation is. I mean, that really bothers me a bit. How are you making the decision that if there's an organism that you've created that could have consciousness, you had the right to take that away from somebody? Somebody, actually. It is a body. Actually, if it had consciousness, it'd be a one, wouldn't it? Someone. Someone is not a body, like a legal body. 7 ways that you, yes you, can end up on a terrorist watch list was another older document. Remember, they only said reasonably possible. There's no thing else you need to have. You've seen these terror watch lists are just fabricated, created. People can't get off of them. And that makes part of this decision of near certainty that you're a lawful target. That all of this needs to be challenged. Somebody has to feel that they can pull this together as evidence and make the challenge. That's not good enough. And here's some more evidence. If you ever thought that they were making all the decisions perfectly right, they were supposed to have courts in order to go through this. We were supposed to have a justice. As those I work with work through it to the Supreme Court cases, we've had a couple cases go to there, right up to it, but the clerk diminishes it, proving we don't have a court of final decision. There's no access to the court of final result. None. And so justice is not ours and not to be ours. But some people luck out. Maybe only in Canada, I don't know. But for those of us that were on terrorist watch lists and blamed to be terrorists or whatever, and even those that are arrested, the government can be wrong. And if the government can be wrong, you should be terrified about the fact they have a policy about being able to pick you to kill you because they're near certain that you're a lawful target. Canada Day bomb plot couple freed after judge rules police entrapped them. I don't see that any different than some guy looking at a bunch of information he got off the internet, by hook or by crook, some investigator who decides with his prejudice that you've been doing stuff that makes you likely to be a target. That it took the judiciary in this case time to figure out that the police set that up. Isn't the military doing that under Obama and this policy to drone people? They set it up. And they set it up even without any facts, just whatever they can come up with. So those of you that you even hear in the news that there's people that are arrested, I don't even know how this case gets through, but they're calling it landmark. That's what I don't understand. How did this case get through to be landmark? But here it is. A decision of Supreme Court Justice throws out guilty verdict of John Nuttall. Again, these names, when I heard them, it's a joke. Nuttall. He ends up getting off because he doesn't have the capacity to pull off what they say he did. He's really not all there. That's what they say. And his name's Nuttall. Fascinating story we have weaving through this stage show that goes on. John Nuttall and Amanda Carodi calling the plot a police-manufactured crime. What have I been saying now? Here's evidence that the judiciary, once it's given a chance, can find police manufactured evidence that at least one justice wouldn't go for it. based on the evidence that was before him about two people that were blamed identified by the government to be terrorists. Reasonable possibility of near certainty that they were the lawful target, and a judge comes in and says, nope, the police manufactured that condition, and the police are actually the heads of an organized criminal syndicate that did so. He almost goes that far to say syndicate, but he does say it's an organized and orchestrated matter that the cops made and manufactured the crime they fingered someone else for. Should terrify you that that's what these police are doing. We have the evidence, and that this policy, it's coming to the battlefield America, this is the same type of people that are making the rules before a judge. But and notwithstanding the corruption, this really is a landmark case, I'll tell you. Without even the idea, extrajudicial, that a judge will look at any of this. You can be targeted. And we're talking drones are kind of an outside there. I'm saying they'll target you. They don't have to use drones to target you in a military consequence. We're just seeing that in the ultimate defiance of any rule, by whatever they decide, they can kill you. They're telling you they can do that. I'm telling you, it comes a lot less than, they don't want to rile the natives with a lot of drone strikes, do they? They're telling you that they can do it at the worst. I'm suggesting to you that means they can do it even more subtly. But they can call somebody, they can have, it can be reasonably possible, what was his words? Reasonably possible that these were high-value targets with near certainty that they were lawful targets to be gone after. And when due process got after it, they were found not to be that possible lawful target. In fact, they were found to be victims of the very police making the decision to drone you. This is the police again, making those decisions. I feared for my life. We feared for the safety of society. We just killed them, executed them on spot. Luckily, they didn't have a drone striking force in Canada. These people were forced to go through the judiciary, and luckily for them, it's found out they don't have the capacity. And the government at every turn made it up, made everything. The judge said, these people were not capable of even coming close to this, except for the aiding and abetting that was done by the cops to make it so. In fact, when they got into discussions with these people, it was so outlandish what they wanted to do if they were given the opportunity, like take over a naval submarine. That was one of their suggestions. The police said, no, we can't go that way. We have to go do it over here. Do this instead. The suggestion that these people got fired up into thinking they could do, they didn't even have the capacity to understand that maybe going after a naval sub was just a little bit too big for them. That the cops focused their attention on something that they could handily set up to get them involved was another thing the judge found out. Utilizing people that had no capacity. Now, when they take away your capacity, you don't understand that. My listeners don't understand that. They'll take away your capacity, and then they'll blame you. So that's one thing. You all think you all got smarts, and you think you can figure things out, and you can put your fist up against the eagle. They legally deal with you in that they take away your capacity, and now you're subject. So it's not so simple either. You think it is, but it's really not. These police are making these decisions. Luckily, we have evidence now. Precedential evidence that they will make mistakes. They will set you up, and they don't care. It took one judge looking at it to actually do it, sadly in Canada. It didn't happen in the United States, where home of the free, the brave, and all that nonsense. So we have the police state doing these decisions. They're giving you the policy, the police program for how they're deciding to snuff you all out. It's all on conjectural things, have no substance whatsoever. We've proved that now with these people being let off. No, the police make this stuff up to hurt them. That the UN backs Obama in a takeover of the police. And this was a little bit, in my mind, a little bit hyped up, but it is substantiatable in generality and context, where Obama is federalizing the cities and the municipalities. We talked about that last week, so this is kind of on the heels of that. A UN-backed secret Obama police takeover. International organization calls for federalization of U.S. law enforcement to be beefed up to cover all America. Okay, so this is now a reflection to the international nature of this, as though we went to Canada to see evidence that the police will create the crime that they blame you for, and that the UN is there to agree with that. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice has provided oversight and recommendation for improvement of police services in a number of cities with consent decrees. This is now showing you the judiciary, the Justice Department is using the so-called law in an adverse way to force cities to implement federalization. These consent decrees can be challenged, I believe, on the concept of sue and settle, which, if you follow even the territorial appellate courts in the Ninth Circuit, said sue and settle cases are illegal. They're another type of crime. But this is what the consent decrees are where the federal government attacks a city who has other things to do and will not fight the federal government for lots of reasons, and they just agree to the imposition. The imposition of these psychopaths to do these types of policies against you, which is comporting to United Nations guidelines. This is not a new story. This is just it's now the nuts and bolts on how they're taking you down. This is one of the most effective ways to reduce discrimination in law enforcement, and it needs to be beefed up and increased to cover as many as 18,000 plus local law enforcement jurisdictions. So they come underneath the idea of discrimination. Now you understand we're back to civil rights and how they're using that to put exactions of every kind, and how they use the mechanisms of the system in order to make that so. The consent decrees are already being implemented in Newark, New Jersey. Folks, if you live in any one of these places, Newark, New Jersey, Miami, Florida, Los Angeles. Well, I wonder if Miami, Florida, that's why they're doing the Zika. Anyway, Los Angeles, California, Ferguson, Missouri, Chicago, Illinois, and other municipalities. Here's how it works. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice files a lawsuit in federal court against a city, county, or state alleging constitutional and civil rights violations by the police or at a corrections facility. It is done under 42 U.S.C. 1414.1, Section 1414.1 of the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, granting the Attorney General the power to prosecute law enforcement misconduct. The municipality then simply agrees to the judicial finding without contest, and the result is a wide-reaching federal court order that imposes onerous regulations on local police. Let's go back to 1414.1. Interestingly, I've been studying that with regard to what I'm looking at doing. Then let's go to first, before we go to the section, to the code title, which is 42. Remember, I said this is about civil rights and the imposition of the federal government to assert civil rights equally. 14 U.S.C. Section 1981 is that title. 14 U.S.C. Section 1414.1 is for any law enforcement that goes against that title. So the law is already federalized against certain people. Well, I'm looking at using it for these people that are in the local government that are violating that law. And although the Attorney General is said to be the isolated entity to go after it, I am now researching, and so you learn how to put these laws together, a RICO action, which I have developed, allows you to be the prosecutor for organized crime. That I'm looking to see if whether or not I can be that prosecutor to invoke 1414.1. I'm going to do it a slightly different way. The point is, these rules and these laws are set up that you see now as a tool to get policies implemented. It's like soft law that you force consent. They said they're consent decrees, didn't they? Did you miss that? They get consent decrees. They got your consent. It's required. And we don't understand the power of that. And we don't understand how to, in a way, the municipalities need to come back and say, well, what you're doing is under color of authority. You're using this color of authority to extort from us the sweetheart deal that you want to force down our throat. No one's called them out. Only thing I can figure they're doing there is because the attorneys won't. Why? Because it advances, to fight them would not advance the agenda. So there's a dynamic that we don't even know about going on already that federalizes your police departments. And I can tell you, I've heard behind the scenes and we're talking with a few people, the word comes down and through the system long before we even hear about it, about how these people are going to act when they're in the offices. So understand there's a big, there's a military maneuvering going on all the time. We're being outflanked, outmaneuvered, out everything because we're just not paying attention, or we choose not to pay attention. And the end result for us is the same. They're going to bring on this oppression. If you think it's going to be about drones, you're making it too big a problem. They're just telling us that on the outset they're willing to do that with the most fantastical machines. They won't be using the fantastical machines against you. They're just going to use the authority they've gotten through this time while you were watching up in the sky for the drone to come. What they've been working on the ground to bring in and infiltrate around you, they'll be using that against you. And because you allowed the municipality you live in to give a consent decree, you didn't fight it. You didn't fight it on police power regard. You didn't understand enough. I don't even know what all you could defend yourself with if it's defensible. I've just found out when you look into it and you start thinking about it, there's a lot you can do. Remember, the 10th Amendment, the bond case is the right of someone in the 10th Amendment where your state doesn't do what it's supposed to do. You have standing underneath the 10th Amendment to go do what needs to be done. Go read the bond case of, I think it was 2005. Look very particular, though, to that case. It's got a very interesting specificity, but I think most cases can be set up to fit inside, where the people become the power to do what the state authorities didn't do that they ought to have done. So this is the handshake and a concurrence is global about having police centralize is what you're looking at. Centralize the control. And empower who? Their military troops in the form and uniform of the troops, the police, the code enforcers, even up into your officers in the government that are conducive. And we've talked about this thing in the military sense, in the martial law sense, and I've told you read Lieber Code, and there's always these evidences in the rule how much latitude the police get. They're the troops. They get protected, and they'll get protected. I told you this a long time ago. They are protected in all things up until it embarrasses the occupying authority. And those things that it embarrasses the occupying authority in other words, it can't make an excuse, that's when you're going to start to see the accountability on the troop, the officer, whoever the officer was that made the bad decision. You've seen them able to, if they've been told to say that I feared for my life, and they get to execute you. That little scenario has all been worked out. Well, there's some things that are going on that are kind of outside I feared for my life that they're still having to cover for. But here's an evidence in this next report that this military consequence we live under that's being federalized and brought to your towns is a military consequence where you, under equal civil rights, understand, you're not treated equal to those that are your wardens. We see this all the time. I can find the proof for the ability in the Lieber Code. I can also find it in other places. It all depends on where you want to look. The precedent for this condition, which is not a Republican form of representative government and equal protection under the law, is in many places in history and in even current international provisions of law. That we see here the evidence of the system protecting its troops to an absurd level, making absurd technicalities. Ohio Supreme Court strikes down law banning cops from having sex with minors. Ohio Supreme Court strikes down law banning military troops protecting and securing the state of the occupier from having sex with minors. A Ohio cop narrowly avoided being sent back to prison, for having sex with a 14-year-old boy after the state Supreme Court ruled in his favor last week, stating the law barring cops from having sex without minors was unconstitutional. That was as opposed to teachers and clergy and all these other people, coaches, administrators, scout leaders. They said that police officers are a special class because their job does not include the victim. It does not include a close official connection to the victim. Now, I don't know about you and you ever have an experience of being arrested. That seems to be about the most close and intimate type of job description I can imagine what they get to do. But that interaction's not within the scope that the code or the legislation could envelop. That cops are treated special. They've got just too much investment and value to the system. Should be read into this story. You'll get the link. I think it's disgusting, but you need to read what the government, the bar members will do to protect the military troops and how they segregate them from us in subtle ways that show that you're not in an equal society. And then I ask you, when you see the evidence that you're not in the society they said that was equal, what society do you live in? These cops that can show absolute power over people, they have the power to execute other people, is now banned. It's in a government, the people are banned from saying that a cop is not supposed to have sex with minors. What reality are you living in where that's actually going on? Can't be a limited form government where everybody's equal under the law. We should have seen that come with immunity to judges and immunities to the officers and qualified immunities and all this other stuff. But this is in my mind, a disgusting story, a disgusting condition, and yet we see, and I'll look into it enough to see an evidence of what I've been telling you. That the police that you confront are military that are serving the occupier, that are protected, not equal to you. Is, I think, to me, it struck me. Maybe you find other reasons. I mean, there's lots of discussion we could have about it, but this is what kind of strikes me on my, in my mindset about what I come to talk to you about. Trying to expose these things. Again, and remember the timing of all this. All comes together on all this stuff. Federalization, now we see sweetheart deals, sue and settles, going to the municipalities. They agree. They have to agree because they don't fight. Why? Because the bar members won't do it. They don't bring up any kind of defense against sovereignty of the state, right? None of that comes up. No, can't do that because the UN's got the Bar Association. IBAnet.org is the international horde of trespassers in the form of a legal profession that is the legal advisor to the UN, which believes the very same things. And the UN supports Obama's federalization through this method. Should not be okay with a whole lot of people. So right in the same amount of time, though, another policy comes up, in the same notion that we're federalizing, and I'm saying this was federalizing way before. This was already on the books before this, all the other stuff got here. And it's the calls to resume community policing. What does that actually mean? We've talked about community policing, and I've showed you where it destroys all your constitutional rights. The policing, the military inquiry into what they consider to be a threat to the community overrides all your rights should be a question for you to answer. What reality do you actually live in? Not the one you're told, not the one you believe, but the one you actually live in. That there's now a call within this federalization of the police, this militarization of the police that I've been bringing to you for a couple of weeks now. Calls to resume community policing. Well, that's never ended. That's actually just starting. But now you're seeing the drumbeat to enforce it under the excuse, and in this case, because of the Baton Rouge problem. Together, Baton Rouge is just one of the many organizations across the country seeking more ties between police and citizens. But can it work? Now, first of all, I didn't know that Baton Rouge was an organization. But there they tell you, a familiar refrain has emerged from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as residents struggle to process a spate of police-related violence for the high-profile and fatal police shooting of Alton Sterling on July 5th, then the killing of the 3 police officers in an ambush, so-called, on Sunday. I've told you it sounded to me like there was 2 gangs fighting, or 2 groups of people had a fight, and the police walked into the ambush. They walked in between the 2 ends fighting. There's evidence, all of that. So anyway, that's an excuse. This is the story they tell us. There are numerous cities around the country struggling with fraught relations between police and black communities. Local leaders and residents are calling for investment in community policing to help bridge the racial divide. All frauds there, folks. Investment in community policing and buy-in for this community, foreign military, to bridge, to access the excuse they're making of racial divide to infiltrate your towns. One organization that aims to spearhead the effort is called Together Baton Rouge, a coalition of a dozen of religious institutions and leaders, black and white, from Louisiana City. So now they make a coalition of people that are really the usurpers or the dupes, which is probably more likely, although I know in the 90s the religious leaders were co-opted. They're no longer really, they're not really the, if I can say, the Bible-speaking type of religious leaders in the Christian sense. They're really agents underneath a state-created 501c3 or church. And I've told you before, you can identify these state churches that are controlled by the government and regulated by the government and regulated by the IRS because of that status. And if they chose that status and they chose to be a state church, there is another provision in the tax law that they could have chose that made them separate, and they didn't. I've told you all about this before. It just comes back up here. That these people are the state groupings of people that get together to advance the agenda right underneath your nose. How do you remove the fear? How do you remove the mistrust? By building relationships. That's what they're pushing. Well, what it is if the military would back off, and if we would throw out the military and the occupation by the Bar Association, we wouldn't probably have these troubles. So they're offering a solution for you to buy into, and it's not the one that we need. But community policing, again, by definition, is the destruction of any rights you thought you had, if there were ones left, that they're going to offer as the solution. Again, solution. The Solutions Network. We sued this, folks, in 2013. The Solutions Network is a treason against the people. And yet these people are bringing the excuse of a Baton Rouge firefight and the killing of an officer to go ahead and bring this policy right on in. It's not that community policing can't work. It's just that it's just what is it? Okay, let's find out. It's the emergency footing that agencies go on and communities go when there's a crisis. But that's much, much harder. But what's much, much harder is to even define what you're talking about. What does that actually mean? What's going on to do it? Is there community interest in it? Well, let's go back. It's an agency footing on dealing with crisis, whether they've fabricated or not. Agency is agency. It's not law. It's the emergency footing the agencies go on. Where's the emergency power for an agency to go on this? You give it to them by your consent. The definition right there is enough for me. I don't need any more, but they want to go and talk more about it. They're going to try and give you all the warm and fuzzies about how this works, and it's all a felony against you. Dr. Reverend Wesley, community policing is about getting officers into neighborhoods as a matter of course and not just in response to emergencies. Well, they don't come in response to emergencies happen. They just come and take the record. So this is a lie as well. This is a reverend, so-called, telling you this lie. And they want the cops in your face all the time. Remember, community policing is already the law in a lot of places. The cops get to break down your door because of it. Now they want your agreement that they're going to be right outside your door so they can run in quicker, I suppose. Policemen are going to have to get out of their cars, walk the street, and have conversation with the black guy on the corner, the guy who has his pants hanging down, and get to know him as an individual, not as a stereotype. Until we get those types of relationships going, we're never going to our community moving forward. What the hell's moving forward, folks? Why aren't you just setting up an intelligence gathering system and allowing people to feel that's what you need for your safety? And in fact, it's really just what the intelligence side of the military that's watching over you needs to keep track of you individually. I get to know them. I get to know my enemy better. I get to know those I'm in control of better. The Department of Justice and Community-Oriented Policing Services, COPS, there's your services, define community policing as a strategy to build trust between police and the community through cooperative efforts among law enforcement, community members, nonprofits, businesses, and others. What have I told you over and over? Go to the Jefferson Mining District website, and I want you to find the MMAC documentations and read that. You're going to find out that cooperative efforts are felonies against you. In law, folks. It's not my opinion. This is not just an opinion that was put together. It was cited. It was documented. Community policing on its own destroys rights. Cooperative efforts to do so are a felony to destroy rights. And they get the buy-in from all these people to continue. That's your consent. So what's coming up with this federalization is more push now to allow another policy that destroys your rights to have favor in the community. And they actually want to get in closer contact, in more tangible contact with you to do so. So let's say this thing goes wild. They get in contact with you. You don't like it. They don't want you to get away. They want to know more about you, and you don't really have the choice because your choice was if you live there, you are now agreeing to this imposition that the United Nations agrees to, Obama agrees to, your local police chief, your local trooper, and whoever else, and his little cruiser. You know, the word cruiser comes from Admiralty. The police get Facebook to kill live stream on standoff, which ended with suspect being shot to death, is what you're going to be having. Remember I told you you're going to record these instances, and there's tools to get you back on the internet. The government has already have the cops directly to where you're going to go to shut you out with all this community trust that they're building. Who's the beneficiary and who's the trustee on that one? That they are now going ahead of you. You're going to have fast think about how to deal with this, have an alternative way to go. I told you, don't involve yourself with Facebook, that's for sure. But that little shootout that they had, that one with the shotgun, the police come up for the ostensible reason of a traffic failure to appear, which they could have arrested her on her next trip to the grocery store a lot simpler than having to have a shootout and kill her. But while she was streaming, the cops got a hold of Facebook and they shut down her account. Then they stripped those videos off, and then they brought the account back. It was all gone. To me, that's tampering with evidence. I don't know about you. But somebody needs to call that out. But this is the control that they're starting to give up around us, even in light of the stuff I've been telling you you're going to have to start doing. They are moving there to get rid of those actions that you're going to take to try and protect yourself. And one of the things I tell you about when you're doing videos and all that, they're messing with you and you're not involved and you're backed off, just tell them they're tampering with evidence and that's a felony. And if they're doing it with a gun, that's enhanced. And that's on video now. But you better have your video going to some place that they can't shut off. A private server, a private account they don't know about, some kind of a thing that records even on your own phone, which is maybe limited, or your camera. You don't have to have a phone. Any camera will work if it has access to the internet. That the local federalization coming to you is already in place to allow these psychopaths to decide for you what you're doing, and then they decide on that what they're going to do to secure the safety of their troops. And science fiction type ideas. We started hearing about predictive policing, or I think it was the movie Minority Report that just popped in my mind. Maybe that was where this was as well. Predictive programming. Predictive now policing. Remember we talked earlier that what's reasonably possible and near certainty is made up in the minds of a psychopath. about you. Now we have predictive policing. It isn't science fiction. It's in Sacramento. For those of you there. And I read the story. It's a nice, warm and fuzzy story, man. They can really do a lot of stuff for us. And they can. I mean, I guess that's the thing. They know right where to go. That is the reasonable. And it is kind of hands off and not so in your face. But predictive policing is now being implemented in Sacramento. And they're all up with it. Predictive policing speaks to that possible and near certainty, doesn't it? So this line of news here we've had in the last week, to me, is just screaming of militarization at the local level, and they've got it on us. They've already got it in place and working, and they're getting better at it. And we're standing flat-footed, at least, if not completely footless, at 2 feetless, making noise like crickets, because it's just so warm and we're just so august. Fall's around the corner, folks. 4 seasons. We got fall, winter, spring, and August, right? So here we are. And there's fall again. So we got the august crickets before the fall. Community predictive policing is the definition of your life in prison is all I can see. Part of me wants to laugh, maybe laugh out loud like the insane guy at the State Department. Part of me is really laughing about a lot of this. I'm not, there's a lot more funny guy somewhere. It's not here, and it's not, sometimes, and it's certainly not when I'm doing my studies and doing my writing and stuff, but, I do have, funny thoughts, that maybe no one hears. See, this is one of them. The lunacy behind us allowing all this, and it's right in our face, and we still stand there and take it. And how they use all this stuff against us. Like I said, Protocols of the Elder Zion, just look at it as a manual for your frailties. And if you don't read it that way, you're missing it. You're missing the whole point. And this is the predictive policing policy that they're doing. This is how they're developed it. What I've said again, I just think about that. What I've been telling you for years is right here in these stories today, for sure. And how this all works, how it's been working, how it's going to work. It's going to get more tied down. And because I don't mean us struggling. We can't struggle. That'll make it tighter. We have to make ourselves distinct and different enough to be able to give ourselves a shield, a protection, a distance between, and then address them in places they have no right to do. Like I found easier to do in the land disposal law. Police to arrest people based on sentiment analysis of their tweets. I read this stuff and I really don't know the value of Twitter. I don't know. I put stuff out. We do some tweeting and all this, that, and the other. But here they are. It's again, as I've said before, this is the silent weapons of quiet wars. You plug yourself into the utility of a digital forum, and they'll use the big data analysis on you and figure you out. Well, in this case, now the police are doing again this. They're determining the possibility of you being a lawful target based on your tweets. That I look at that, well, maybe I don't need to tweet no more. That might happen. I don't know. It might happen. Like I said, I don't get on Facebook. I don't get on Google. I don't do lots of stuff. In fact, I hear lots of people talking to each other on Google, on Skype. A little twinge of jealousy. I'd like to be talking with people, but I won't get on Skype. So mess that. That's just going to be the cost I have to bear. No one wants to use an alternative? Okay, fine. But a lot of people don't care. That's fine. I do, because I talk to people. What I say is pretty dangerous. I mean, for what they're going to do, and if someone finds that out and interferes with it, that can be dangerous to them. But you don't think that your conversations are being sentiment analysis going through Skype? And now the police are arresting people based on that. I mean, totally fabulous to me. I mean, look at the fantastical world that they're creating around this. Boy, job security. How did we even get here? Is this a mind-boggler to me? But here we are. Minority Report in real. Matrix is not a movie. The chip and PIN credit cards hacked easily. Black Hat Conference proves. These new digital thing, all digital analysis and intervention and hacking and picking up information that you don't even know is there. some idiot somewhere is making a decision on what's possible around your lawful target certainties. It should not be okay with y'all. But I hear the cricket, so I don't know what more to say. My hands are clean at that point, but it's a dirty business, and so the tar sticks and stays persistent. That whatever you don't do is still reflecting on what I'm not doing. We're kind of in it together on that level. Chip and pin credit cards, folks. You'll get a Blogcaster link. They're big time hackable. The systems are big time hackable. When they fix the systems, they're still hackable. If you think about getting into a digital system, these digital things, these the Silent Weapons of Quiet Wars, these places that you can fit yourself in the digital world are owned. They're owned, and so will you be if you don't figure out an alternative to it all and how to articulate that alternative. Those of you, again, now moving on into the digital, they use your digital interaction to predict your sentiment. You don't think they're watching what you're purchasing? We did all this before. It's already happened after the marathon bombing Boston. They did it to a family. They told us it was coming, and this is what they're going to use. We've heard all the banking interactions. We now find your system's not anything digital can be hacked. What people have done with a 1 and a 0 is fascinating. And so you want to go into this digital currency, which seems to be a setup psyop for me. I mean, I've thought about it. It's interesting and it's really a usable tool, but not with who it looks like it was created. Bitcoin crashes after an exchange admits a security breach. Over 60 million stolen. If you think that even all this security, you think pins and chips and pin numbers and stuff are going to protect you, you think Bitcoin's got bigger? No, they don't. Digital currencies are really going to be a difficult thing in my mind to legitimize. For you, I'm not talking about whether the legitimate people who use them will legitimize them. I'm talking about if you think you're going to keep independent, you're going to have to reinstitute the independent society. Yes, it's going to be a lot smaller. I found out by going from Skype to other things how small the universe will be. It's pretty quiet. And that's really not a good insight. It's the true insight, but it's not good to see that that's what's going to happen. You invest in Bitcoin, someone comes and steals it. You think your pins and your chips are all protected? No, it's all a lie. It's just to get you in and get your stuff stolen and control it anyway. Who's going to control it? Who has the king to that king? Whoever has the keys to that kingdom, your encryption keys to that kingdom wins. Period. Over. So continue, and the psychopath is making these decisions. The black hats are making these decisions for us. It's the worst of us. Why I think, laws were made for remedy. We're outside of that day. We're in bureaucracies that are manned by psychopaths that are making decisions on predictive insights to create what they would consider a near certainty of you being a lawful target. Yes, drones are kind of fantastical, but that's not how they take you out in the street. And most of you don't have a clue of what ball of tar they throw you into to try and work through once you get in. We've got all the proof now. If we had an opinion before, we have all the proof. They're agreeing to us that they're just an organized criminal syndicate that you've allowed to continue. And again, I've condemned you. Over years, I've condemned you that it's there, and as long as we don't respond to it, we're criminals. We're aiding and abetting that crime. And I hope it's not a judgment. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I want you to think deeply about that and what else can we do to stop this. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope something I said was helpful. Hopeful insight will give you some new awareness and make you strive out and make a wrong right. Thank you to Grimner, reallibertymedia.com, and all the work you do to keep that up, and freedomsnetwork.com with Bo Diddy as well, and Jules at ucy.tv, and you terrestrial broadcasters. Appreciate it, folks. markonthebeast.yahoo.com. Take care. I'll be here next week. Tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.